O Allah, expand my chest and ease my affair, and untie my tongue so that they may understand my speech.
أسمع من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. My name is Haris.
And I'm Ali Forza. Welcome to the Steadfast Soul Podcast. Today we are talking about self-improvement. Super excited. This is an area that I absolutely love. Constantly striving to become a better person every day. So yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think self-improvement is one of those areas where a lot of people have a lot of things to say.
Of course.
And I think it's actually, and I think Islamically, it's one of those things where actually a lot of people don't necessarily recognize its importance within Islam. A lot of people become complacent with the position of where they are, and therefore the idea of self-improvement doesn't really occur to them that it's necessarily something that they should be doing. And there's a couple of reasons for that, and we'll get into that later on. But yeah,
Insha'Allah, you can unpack that. I'm actually surprised because I always feel like maybe because I'm a new Muslim, that it's sort of like, yeah, of course we're going to be self-improving. We're always going to be, and maybe that's just my personality where I'm like, okay, I know I have a lot of work to do. So yeah, that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. And to be honest, I think it definitely is a born Muslim phenomenon or a long-term Muslim phenomenon where you kind of become complacent with your level of practice and you don't necessarily think about improving. But yeah, like I said, we can unpack that further down the line.
Yeah, absolutely, Inshallah.
So I guess from a starting point, like I guess the thing is, well, what is self-improvement? Like I said, it's a term that lots of people talk about, lots of people say self-improvement. Well, what does that mean to you?
Oh, what does it mean to me? I think it means being very aware. So having self-awareness at all times and being like, wow, I really need to improve on this. And also setting goals. So I think you see what I'm lacking, what sort of skills, hobbies I want to participate in and get better at, and then saying, well, how do I get there? So it's a bit of self-awareness, wanting to take that on. So having courage to take that on. And then also, wanting to do better in life, just really, really realizing that there is a lot of potential and that to reach my potentiality, I have to strive to do that. It's just, I don't think I was born in any way, shape or form with knowing everything or having any skills. So we have to constantly work on ourselves. And that includes, everything from the way we use language to the way we sweep the floor. There's always ways to improve and become more efficient, but also more effective. So, and then that comes with setting goals. So if I know I want to learn Arabic, I have to take the time every day. It's not going to just magically happen, So that means setting goals. And hopefully we'll get into goal setting as well. So setting goals, but then working backwards. Okay, if I know next Ramadan I want to be reciting the Quran in Arabic, well, what does that mean? That means I have to spend hundreds of hours between now and next year. Okay, so that means I have to carve out at least an hour a day. So yeah, self-awareness I think is the biggest thing, and then realizing that I have a lot of work to do and not being discouraged by that, but also being encouraged and feeling like this is exciting, like being excited about life, being excited about taking on different skills and different attitudes, and knowing that this life is a test, but it can be, if you look at it as a game, like how do I win the game today? And that's something that I sort of think about all the time. So
yeah, no, I think you're right, and it is having that awareness to understand that I need to get better. So it's Islamically speaking, the evidence for self-improvement lies in a narration. It's a very long hadith, and okay. I'm not going to recite all of it, but I'll get to the gist of it. And basically, so the Prophet ﷺ is sat amongst the group of Sahabas, and a person walks up to him, and for really oddly at the time, he doesn't have any signs of travel on him, as in his clothes are very clean. He's very well kept. But he's not known to any of the other people, and it's like, well, this is really odd. So he's dressed, he's kind of looks visibly local, but doesn't look like a traveler. So kind of what's going on? And so he comes up to him and he goes, Prophet, tell me about it. He doesn't say so. He says, tell me about Islam. And he goes, Islam is to say the Shahada, except that there is no God but Allah and that Muhammad is a messenger. And he also mentions the 5 pillars. And then he says, and then weirdly, even though the person asked the question, he says to the Prophet ﷺ, you have spoken the truth, which is a really odd thing to say. Well, he's going to the Prophet ﷺ, asking him a question and saying, you've spoken the truth. And then he says, tell me about Iman. So, and he says, Iman is, and then he mentions the 6 pillars of faith, a deity, the prophets, the books, etc., etc., etc. And again, he says, you have spoken truly. And then thirdly, he says, inform me about Ihsan. And then the Prophet ﷺ responds, it's as if it's to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as if you see him. And again, he says, you've spoken correctly. And then the hadith goes on, and then the person leaves. And then the Sahaba are very confused, like, what's going on? So, and then the Prophet ﷺ says, that was Jibreel alayhi salam.
Yeah.
So, what the hadith kind of implicates, and what the scholars have said, that kind of what the hadith demonstrates is this idea of levels within Islam. And there's the idea of there's the entry level where it's Islam, where it says you have acknowledged and accepted that Allah's Lord and there is a messenger, and that's kind of the basis. And then the next level above that is Iman, where it's like you truly believe and your belief has consequences. Your belief results in you change in action, because a belief without a change in actions isn't much of a belief. It's a belief that has no meaning.
Right.
So there's that, and then the level above that is Ihsan, and Ihsan actually translates to excellency.
Oh, cool.
It's to do things with excellence. And it's to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as if, and not just worship, it's like to behave and act in a way where in every moment you're thinking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watching me. Right. So the scholars say that these represent the different levels, and the idea is that as Muslims, we're working between these levels constantly, and that we're striving for the level of excellence. Now, from a self-improvement point of view, this wouldn't be the case if the idea of self-improvement wasn't like, if there's the idea of, not to criticize any of the theologies, but if this idea of, okay, you've just done this and now you're okay, that'd be a different understanding. Whereas in Islam, it's the case of, okay, you've entered the religion of Islam. Now what? You've now reached the station of Muslim. Okay, how are you going to progress? How are you going to progress to being a mu'min? And once you're a mu'min, you then ask yourself, well, how am I going to be a muhsin? A mu'min is the active participle of someone who has iman. So it's like Islam, Muslim, iman, mu'min, ihsan, muhsin.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That's quick habit. Let's but the point is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is demonstrating to us that actually, and there's an ayah, I'll look at the reference in a moment, but there's an ayah that says, don't say that you have believed, say that you have accepted Islam, because those people haven't reached the level of Iman yet. They've only reached the level of Islam. So the idea is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us that there's a criteria for you to get to Iman. It's not just a case of you can self-qualify yourself as being at a particular level, like, I don't know, Scientology, for example, where you just kind of say that you've gone from rank to rank to rank to rank without
with each with each fee you pay, you get it.
Exactly.
You gain a level.
Yes, it's not like that. It's like
right.
you have to have this internal criteria and awareness. And again, it seems to be a constant theme within every episode that we talked about. But we talk about awareness and we talk about taqwa. But you have to have that internal awareness of what it actually means. Like, what's my relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? How am I behaving? How am I acting? And I think when it comes to that, you start realizing that there's no hiding from it. When you're honest with yourself and you say, right, this is how I'm behaving, you can't hide anywhere, because you have to have that moment of kind of honesty with yourself. And I think in any kind of improvement, I'll use sports or fitness, for example. When you speak to coaches, they say you have to be honest with where you're at, not kind of assume that you're at a higher place than you are. You have to be honest, saying, okay, this is what I can do. Because when you acknowledge that, that's how you're able to develop and improve. Whereas if you're just going to have a false sense of seniority about your ability, a false sense of delusion about your ability or your capabilities or where your ranking is, you're not going to be able to improve or develop in an authentic way.
Right, exactly. If you don't think that there is a need for an improvement, then why would you need to improve, right?
Exactly.
That doesn't really make a lot of sense. And I think also this self-awareness, and then, the awareness that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is literally watching you. Like, he's all knowing, all hearing. So it's like, I'm lying to myself. I could have done better. You know what I mean? Because I know, is this enough? Is what I'm doing enough? It's like, if you feel that way, you know that that's not enough, that you need to do better.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I think that's even where it comes from. Like, we were talking before in a previous episode, is that sincerity, and also, being honest with yourself. Right. And so knowing that, like, if I feel that way, and then maybe that's a purity of the heart issue as well. So it's like, if I know that's an issue, then obviously Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala already knows it's an issue. So that's something we have to work on. Yeah, absolutely.
Sure. And there's an ayah in the Quran that says, truly Allah does not change the condition of a people until they change themselves. Surah 13, ayah 11. And this is especially apparent in today's world, where kind of people look at the world and say, oh, well, why is nothing getting better? Why is what's happening to Palestine happening? Yep. Where is this merciful God who's supposed to be helping? Or kind of, why is what's happening in the Congo or in Afghanistan or the Uyghur or the Kashmir or wherever these calamities are happening? And the scholars point out and say, well, actually, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying in the Quran that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not change a condition of a people until they change themselves.
Yep.
So what the scholars say is this ayah indicates a responsibility that every Muslim has to better themselves. To better themselves in order to try change the condition of the people. So if you're frustrated with, well, why is the condition of the people what it is? Then look at yourself and say, well, what is it that I'm doing as a Muslim? What is it that am I being the best Muslim that I can be? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us in this ayah that the condition of the people will not change until you try changing yourself. So if you're concerned and you're frustrated with how the condition of the Muslims is, or how Muslims are being portrayed in the media, or how Muslims are being perceived online, or any of these things, well, ask yourself, what is actually what's my own representation of what it means to be a Muslim? How am I behaving in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's eyes? Because there's a practical knock-on effect that when you're a better Muslim, you'll become a better citizen. When you have a group of better citizens, you have a better community. When you have a better community, you have better countries, etc., etc., etc. So there is going to be that kind of physical knock-on effect. So it starts with that moment of introspection where you're looking at yourself and saying, "How can I be better?"
Right. Did you say knock-on effect?
Yeah.
Okay, never heard that before. Is that a British thing? I've never heard of that term before. A knock-on effect. Okay.
A domino effect to call it, I think.
Oh, okay. Yeah, but it is true though. I was talking to a brother just last night about this. It really is. We see what's happening in the Ummah, and it's like, but we don't have the power to change what's happening, obviously, right? But we can change ourselves, and from that we can change the people around us. Inshallah, like, it's a concentric circle, right? So inshallah, it just keeps going and going, like a domino effect. But, that's the goal. But you have to look at, if the way I'm talking about people, the way my community is, my very own family, and then inshallah that builds momentum. And then if you're having a better community, a better country, then inshallah you're electing better people.
Yeah, exactly.
So.
Yeah. So it's that thing of, well, actually, I'm frustrated with my politicians. Well, actually, what are you doing to help raise the next generation of politicians?
Exactly.
What are you doing to help facilitate better citizens within your community? If you're complaining that, oh, my local masjid isn't doing enough to help the community, well, how much are you volunteering?
exactly. Yeah.
So it's very much a case of Islam doesn't allow the idea, or it doesn't encourage it discourages the idea of just kind of living unto
Complacency.
yourself. Yeah, complacency and just living unto yourself and just say, well, I'm okay. I'll probably get to Jannah and that's enough. Whereas actually there's a concept of, well, how much impact are you having on the people around you to help get them as well?
That's right. That's right. Exactly. Yeah. It's, yeah, no, that's very, very true. And I think it has to do with gratitude. Newman Ali Khan put a really amazing kupa the other, last week or something, maybe 2 weeks ago already. And he's like, how do you do gratitude? So volunteering at your local masjid, at your food bank, knowing that you're helping people who are new to the country, things like that. So it's not just being grateful, but it's doing grateful. Right.
Exactly.
And I think that's really important. You can't just worry about yourself. We're part of a community, right? We don't live in a vacuum. So
sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think kind of unpacking a little bit more about what self-improvement means for yourself internally. And it kind of relates a little bit to the kind of Islam, Iman, and Ihsan. And the idea is that what we have, and people ask, well, why is self-improvement necessary? Why is it not just sufficient for me to kind of pray 5 times a day, give my charity, and I'll be fine? The reason is because we have an enemy who's working against us 24/7, 365, isn't letting up a single moment, a single day to kind of let us be Muslim in peace. So if we've got that person who's working against us, then that means that we have a responsibility on ourselves to kind of work to his antithesis.
Absolutely.
And not let him kind of whisper to us that, yeah, it's okay we're okay in the position that we're in, because fundamentally we'll end up losing. The way someone explained it was, imagine trying to run up a down escalator, and if you stay at a constant pace, you'll stay in the position that you're in. If you stop running, you'll go down. But if you run faster than the escalator's going down, then you'll run up.
Yeah.
And that's what we have to do with the shaitan. Your thoughts?
That's actually a really good analogy in terms of life as a test as well.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, I never really thought about, that's a really great analogy, thinking like, if you've ever run up, a down escalator, it's actually really hard, So that is a really good analogy, thinking like you have to just push through and be uncomfortable. I was saying that on our live stream the other day. You have to lean into being uncomfortable. You have to lean into that. And I think that's a really important, it's okay to be uncomfortable. It's okay to have a little bit of discomfort, and knowing that striving for betterance. And also to talk about, to sort of piggyback on the shaitan is, what does shaitan love to do? Break up families.
Yeah.
Well, you have the most influence within your own family group. So of course, shaitan is trying to attack the family. Well, if we're stronger as a family, because we're praying 5 times a day, we're showing our family mercy and grace, and being caring and loving and showing gratitude. It's like, okay, so that makes a stronger family within, again, makes a stronger community, inshallah, and things like that, because we want stronger families overall, so that can be, outward into, inshallah, a body politic that's stronger and more Muslim and more, so and does things for the community, So I think that's really, really important. It's a great analogy.
Yeah, and there's a hadith that relates to, I can't remember if it's hadith or saying of the scholars, but basically what they say is that the idea, think of your heart as a castle that's up on a hill, and your third actions is the fort itself, and your sunnah actions, the encouraged actions, the Prophet that he did, that encouraged us to do, that's like the moat surrounding the fort. And the extra nafil actions that you do, the extra actions, the non-obligatory actions, that's a fence around the moat. And the idea is that shaitan is coming to attack you, and your heart's in the middle, and the stronger your barriers are, the less likely he's going to be able to influence you. So if you ever get to a point where you think I'm doing enough, that's when you have that vulnerability. So imagine if using that example, let's say you've built your fence, but then you never check for any holes or any kind of any
posts that are,
flaws, or anywhere vulnerabilities, then there's a
mm-hmm.
chance that you're going to be attacked. So the idea is that you're constantly improving, constantly checking. Using exercise for an example, let's say you're someone who struggles to run a mile. You then
Mm-hmm.
train to learn to run a mile. Then running a mile becomes easy to you. Your body's not going to experience the benefits of exercise and improvement if you're only going to stick to that 1 mile. You then have to say, okay, I'm going to run 2 miles, I'm going to 3 miles, or 4 miles.
Right.
So the idea is that our Islam is a similar thing. It's this thing that needs to be exercised, needs to be improved.
Yeah, absolutely.
It needs to be worked on constantly,
mm-hmm.
and I can't become complacent with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's, even although we haven't talked about goal setting yet, I think that's interesting. Running a mile, and then running a mile and a quarter, and then a mile and a half. You have to have digestible goals, something that's like, oh, I know, I want to speak Arabic. I want to recite. I'm going to be terrible next year. Obviously, it's a difficult language, but bite-sized chunks by, doing my Duolingo or doing you have to have, and as a social worker, you teach people that you have to have attainable goals, because then people are like, oh, wow, I can do this. Oh, okay. And then it builds self-reliance and confidence. And you're like, oh, I actually can do this. Because that's people sometimes go, we always talk about baby steps, especially as a new Muslim. If you do something very drastic right away, you're going to forget, you walk up the rungs of a ladder too quickly, you're going to fall down. You have to make those goals accessible, small, and consumable, so that you're more likely to stick with the long-term goal, right?
Yeah. And there's a hadith to that effect where it says, the most beloved of these to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the ones that are most consistent, even if small.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite.
Yeah. The idea is that you have those small little steps. And interestingly, the scholars talk about what the shaitan does is he will convince you and say, you're a terrible person and you need to make a massive change. You then try and make a massive change, but then that massive change isn't sustainable.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And then you end up in a situation where that massive change isn't sustainable, and you just stop, or you give up, and then you start kind of regressing in the other direction. Whereas actually the way to battle the shaitan in this scenario is to say, okay, let me think of these small incremental steps that I can take to improve. As long as my intention is sincere and actually trying to get there, those small incremental steps are going to be much more sustainable and longer lasting than a big chunk of one massive thing that you just do once and then never kind of look at again. They say that the idea is that if you were to take a rock and throw a bucket of water on it, there'd be no effect. Whereas if you took a rock and had a bucket empty on the rock, one drop at a time, you'd end up creating a hole, because it's this consistent effect, this consistent action, this consistent thing that's having an impact on what it is you're trying to achieve.
That's interesting.
So it's really important to come with very achievable, measurable, kind of consistent goals, but not making your goals too easy, which is another thing
that's also a problem.
Yeah,
absolutely. Like, can I do 15 minutes of Duolingo? Yeah, sure. But can I do 45 minutes? That's going to be tough, but I'm going to push myself. People, I think for some reason there's this tendency in certain places of the world where it's like, I don't want to do this. I want to just, there's just so many distractions, right? So I think that's one of the problems, is there is so many, distractions or this pull to the dunya. It's like, I might as well just watch another episode of Netflix. It's like, no, actually get on the phone, do your Duolingo, do whatever it is, that you need to do, read that text in Arabic or whatever that you're trying to get through. I think that's more important, digestible, but also just out of reach. So when you get it, you're like, yeah, okay, I got it. I'm excited. Now I can get to the next thing, digestible, but also, like you said, consistent. And obviously every day is different, right? And that's another issue. But yeah, something that's constant, and also having practices that are at the same time every day. That's why I love the prayers are always generally around the same time, which is very convenient. You can book your entire day around these, and then the weeks and then the months around these very, very similar times. So,
if you look at how our physical actions are designed in Islam, generally there's a lot of organization to them. There's little randomness in Islam. You pray in the same direction every time.
Right.
You pray at the similar time. You have a similar structure. You give a set amount of charity each year. You fast generally a similar number of days. You dress in within a specific parameter. You converse in a specific way. So there's no randomness in how we're asked to do worship. Generally, it's quite a consistent thing to do, because as we know from goal setting, the more organized your goal is going to be, the more likely you are that you're going to be able to achieve it.
Yeah, absolutely. And somebody was saying, you watch a lot of revert stories on YouTube, and a lot of them say, I don't have to worry about all these different things now. I know what time to pray. I know what I can wear. I know what I should be doing. I know it really takes a lot of the guesswork out of life.
Sure.
So because there's so much distraction, it's like, oh, what am I going to wear today? Or what do I have to do? This really just takes that away, and you can sort of, again, sort of have that ease of contentment. Like, okay, it's all, it's already written for me. Like I have to do this at this time. Okay. And I love that. I love that there's no randomness. It's a reassuring, strange way. People are like, oh, it's monotonous and it's tedious. Yeah, it is. It's okay. It's okay. People want this exciting and great life. But it's like, yeah, okay. But you also can be, become heedless that way. Having that sort of monotony and that tediousness is not necessarily a bad thing.
It's this idea of Islam gives you freedom from freedom. Right. And by providing a structure, you then become free of anything else. Because like you say, I'm not having to go to... I'm not going into the world looking at, well, what is it that everyone else is thinking of me, or is everything in the right place? Like the Met Gala happened. I'm only using it as a recent example, but the Met Gala happened a few days ago, and I imagine those people spent thousands of dollars and hundreds of hours planning each minute detail of what they were going to wear and those kind of things. And whereas actually in Islam, it's really straightforward. Here's this box that you have to act within. Here are these parameters that you have to behave within. And then aside from that, it doesn't matter, regardless of anybody else's opinion or their views or what they think of. It doesn't matter, because I'm only concerned with what is it that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is thinking about me, not anyone else. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think that there's people, discipline. I would never want to be disciplined. It's like there's freedom in discipline. Actually, it seems paradoxical, right? But there is freedom in discipline.
Sure.
It's actually quite beautiful. It is actually, as a new Muslim, it's like it just frees your mind in the weirdest way, even though you have to be more disciplined in your everyday life. So, subhanAllah, it's beautiful. Yeah.
Sure. So I think let's talk about goal setting, and then we talk about where people fall foul of self-improvement, or why they don't self-improve. Go on. You're
oh no, go ahead. You probably do in your everyday life talk more about goal setting than I ever do, so please.
No. I think Islamically, like, there isn't necessarily, like I said, aside from the kind of allusions to doing small deeds consistently, there isn't necessarily a specific plan on how to goal set as a Muslim. However, I think from a kind of more contemporary point of view, I think you do have to goal set in Islam to a degree, because otherwise, unless you set goals on what it is you're going to try to do better, you're never actually going to do better. Right. And I think it has to, and I think your goal setting in Islam has to be, I think it has to be tangible.
Yes.
Because there's ayahs constantly in the Quran where it says, you have to believe and do good deeds, or why is it that you I'm going to pull it up correctly because I don't want to misquote it. Why do you say that which you do not do is
yes, I have that ayah up right now, if I could read it. It's one of my very favorite ayahs.
Go ahead.
Yeah, please. Bismillah. It's chapter 2, verse 44, ayah 44. Do you preach righteousness and fail to practice it yourselves, although you read the scripture, do you not understand? I think that's a really important ayah to we can't talk about, and I think that goes along with sort of this idea of suspicion or envy as well, which is, we've kind of talked about that before in previous podcasts, but where we're like, oh, we're judging other people, or we're envious of or we're suspicious of other people. But it's like, wait, why am I, you give other people excuses. Why don't I think it's an interesting idea, is that people want other people to, because they're not doing it themselves, right? So they're sort of, we see something as a reflection of who we are, right? So it's like,
Sure.
I'm suspicious of that person, or I'm weary of that person. It's like, well, because maybe you feel spiritually unwell yourself. Why are you, I think that's also something to take notice of within your own sort of, being.
Yeah. I think as far as goes, I was actually going to quote a different ayah which has the same meaning, but it's fine. So it's Surah 61, ayah 2. Oh, you who believe, why do you say that which you do not do? And I think as far as goal setting's concerned, it's a case of, whereas actually, and the reason why I say generally goal setting with Islam is more of a practical thing. It relates a little bit back to what we talk about spirituality anyway, is how spirituality and improvement as a Muslim is a result of your physical manifestations. So the idea is that because generally, if you ask all Muslims, they'll say, I want to be a better Muslim. But then you ask them, well, how do you plan to become a better Muslim?
Right.
And they're like, I don't know, just be better. And it's like, well, actually, no, that can't, that doesn't make any sense. And it's not practical. It's not tangible. And the reason why is because your heart is a direct manifestation of your actions, as in, if you're doing a certain level of practice, and you're not going to try and improve that, then you can't necessarily expect your heart to improve, because you're not giving it the right food, or creating the right environment, or giving it the right fuel to make it improve.
Right.
So if you're wanting to say, I want to be a better Muslim, your starting point is actually, what am I? And it's probably not even praying more nafil, or praying more salah, or fasting more. Okay, that's part of it, but it's actually, well, what's the environment I'm in that's going to make me become a better Muslim? Do I still have the same friends? Am I still watching the same types of videos online? Am I still listening to the same things? Am I still in the same environment that I'm in? If I'm not going to change any of those factors, how can I expect to improve? And one of the resistors to your increasing good, so there's an interesting concept that the scholars talk about, and they say there are people who will aspire to increase in their good deeds, but they're unable to do so. And the reason is because they're continuing in their haram and their sins without any kind of remorse or regret. So if you're wanting to improve your level of worship and become a better Muslim, one of your first steps is you've got to look at, well, what is it that I'm doing on a daily basis that's upsetting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because it's stopping me from progressing. Think of like an athlete who runs, I don't know, he runs 100 meters in 10 seconds. It's like, how come I can't get under 10 seconds? But then his diet isn't changing, and his sleep isn't changing, his exercise regimen isn't changing. Well, if he's not going to change any of those factors, he's not going to be able to improve just by willpower alone. There has to be some kind of circumstantial change that's going to help accelerate and facilitate your improvement. So as a Muslim, if you're wanting to improve and you're wanting to become a better Muslim, the first step is look at your environment and see, and your own actions, and say, well, actually, what is it that I can actually do to improve?
Right. I say looking at yourself, like, do I have rage? Do I have envy? Do I have suspicion of other people? Why do I have that? So I think inward, of course, and then changing your environment, your outward, of course, and inshallah, those things interact with one another, right? So I'm in a rageful situation. Why do I burst out? Or it's like, oh, that's just the way I am. It's like, well, not really, actually. That's not really who you are. That's a learned behavior. You can unlearn it, right? Or why am I arrogant? Or or I'm not a sinner, right? So there are, we have to think about, there's inward. You first have to think about, am I really arrogant, or am I really rageful, or am I jealous of that person? Do I have envy? And then you can change your environment. The next step is changing your environment. So self-awareness, of course, and then saying, well, why do I feel that way? Why do I feel that? Why am I in this situation? Oh, I'm jealous of this person. this person has a better whatever it is. It's like, okay, so let me remove myself from that situation. Like you just said, the environment. Okay. So then you can, okay, well then I don't have that envy anymore, or I don't have that rage anymore, whatever it is. So yeah, I think it's inward first, and then it becomes outwards. Your closest, again, your closest, your environment that you're most close to.
So what advice do you think you would give to other converts or other people who are trying to set goals for themselves and wanting to improve? Because you, like I said, you're very much in that new phase. I mean, it's been about 6 months now, but still relatively into that new phase of kind of what it means to be Muslim. So I don't know, what's that advice that you would give from your perspective as someone who's kind of growing quite new?
Yeah, to set goals for people. So I think you would have to, I think, of course, the first one is learn how to pray, right? So set goals. So learning how to pray. I know we talked about that when you were coaching me as a new revert. Is learning how to pray. I did a whole video. I was watching the video series to learn how to pray. And then you said, okay, are you done with the video series? I'm like, kind of, I'm 90% there. You're like, stop watching the video, push yourself. And I eventually did, it was more like a training wheel, so it's like, learn your prayers, start reading the Quran. That's another one that's really, and try and do a juz a day. And I know that seems like a lot. I know for me, it's almost an hour a day, but it's like, if it's too much, you don't have the time, then just do half a juz, and then it takes you 2 months. But if we can get through the Quran in a month, the month of Ramadan, Inshallah, you can keep up with that. And I think that's the thing. I was mentioning it earlier on the live stream. It's like, you have to push yourself, but also, every day is different. So be gentle with yourself. Some days you're going to read a juz, some day you're going to read half a juz, the next day you're going to, so you have to also have, be merciful with yourself as well. But I think you have to, and also you have to want it. I think there's this, as a new Muslim, you want to learn this stuff. You want to do this. So there's this automatic enthusiasm. So, it's like it's like a rubber band. So when you become Muslim, you're just like, yeah, let's do this. Okay, Nafil prayers, Fard prayers. You're really, at least for me, I was just like, everything right away. Let's do this. And then you're just like, okay, I'm actually really tired. Like, this is a lot, right? This is a lot right away. But I would ask the same question to you as somebody who's born Muslim. And I know all born Muslims have to make that conscious choice of implementing those prayers, that not everybody was born with practicing families around them, environments around them that were practicing. So if you weren't around them as a born Muslim, when you made that decision to become or practice Muslim, become Muslim, because you have to become Muslim as well. The environment around you is maybe a little bit easier. How do you set goals as a born Muslim to become more Muslim?
I think the first thing is, and you said a really interesting thing, was you have to want it. And what that means for a born Muslim is having to want to change. And I think this leans a little bit into kind of why people don't change. But what ends up happening is people will say they'll want to change, but they don't actually want to change. Because they're very comfortable in their environment, they're very comfortable in their level of practice, but also there's an element of guilt and denial, because they'll go to the point where they say, oh, well, if I change, I'm going to have to change XYZ. Or if I actually really still enjoy this sin that I do, so because I'm at level A in practice and I'd like to get to level B, but I don't want to give up the sin that's stopping me to get to level B. So I'm just going to carry and do it and just stay at level A and just hedge my bets on this will be sufficient and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be forgiving. And they then become complacent and just say, oh, well, actually, what level A is fine, because it's like, it's enough. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that everyone who says the Shahada will go to heaven. So I'm okay with that. And people kind of convince themselves that that's sufficient.
Right.
So I think if you actually want to change, that's the first step. It's like, how much do you actually want to change though? Okay, you're saying you want to change, but do you actually want to change? Do you actually want to be a better Muslim? And I think that's where a lot of born Muslims or people who've been Muslim for a long time, they fail. And again, the environment plays a certain part to it because they'll have cousins, they'll have uncles, they'll maybe even have like immediate family members who aren't necessarily that committed to wanting to change.
Right.
So it's quite a difficult challenge, and you don't have any comparison within yourself or within your immediate surroundings to say, well, this is a good Muslim and this is a not so good Muslim, because you are the Muslim and you've just converted. So it's like, well, actually, the only comparison you have is to who you were yesterday. So you're gonna it's easier to be better than that because, well, actually, I know what I was yesterday, so this is what I'm gonna be. Whereas actually for Muslims in Muslim-born environments or where there's lots of Muslims surrounding them, it takes a lot of courage to be the one to want to change, because everybody around you is also saying, well, actually, no, I'm fine as well, because I could have an uncle who smokes and watches music and watches Bollywood. He's convinced he's Muslim. He says he's Muslim. He says his Shahada. He prays his five times a day, but he also do these XYZ other things. So as a person who's trying to navigate, well, actually, what does it mean? Is he wrong? Am I wrong? Am I going too extreme? Am I being the extremist in the family? Am I like converting too much? Like am I changing too much? So there's a lot of those kind of things to think about when you're actually trying to improve. And then it's about sorry. And then I was going to say, but then it's about coming to the realization that actually, if I want to improve, I kind of need to suppress all of those thoughts and then start actually thinking, okay, do I actually want to change? And if I do actually want to change, there is possibly going to be some resistance from the people around me. To kind of, well, actually, it's a bit different for them, but also for a lot of people, it's to appease their own guilt. So they won't necessarily be encouraging, and they may even be discouraging for no other reason other than they feel guilty about the fact that they're not at that level of practice. So when you say to them, oh, actually, that thing's not right, or we shouldn't do this, they'll be like, internally, they'll be like, not have enough courage or strength or iman to be able to make that change themselves. So the defense mechanism for that is to discourage. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And then it's like, oh, you're a show off. That's Riyah. Yeah. What are you doing? Oh, you think you're so much better than us. I think there's this is a human problem, not just a Muslim problem, is worrying about what other people think of you.
Yeah.
Right. And then also, like you just said, an uncle or whatever, as an example, then he thinks you're a show off or something. And then it's like, because he has to confront his own bad behaviors, and people hate that. They really hate that, and especially if they're, if you come from a semi-practicing family, it's like, oh, it's good enough. It's who we are. It's like, no, I want to, and then you're considered you're being extreme. Like, oh, you're wearing hijab now, so you're extreme. I was surprised when I heard sisters say that. And I'm like, oh, you come from a born Muslim family. They're like, oh no, this is considered extreme. I'm like, what? I was shocked. And this is more than one sister has told me this. And I was like, wait, what? How does that work? And it's like, well, because it's almost as if you think you're better than us. Sure. Oh, okay, sure.
And also,
what does that say about us?
Yeah. And also the other thing that happens is kind of people unfortunately discourage you based upon the other things that you do. Like you'll try improving one aspect and say, oh, well, what's the point of you trying to improve in that aspect when you're still failing in these 3-4 other aspects?
Interesting.
That happens a lot. So for example, think of an athlete who's changing his diet but is still struggling in other parts of their regimen. A coach isn't ever going to say, oh, well, do you want, because you're still struggling with those other aspects, leave the diet because there's some no benefit because you're not changing everything else. Of course they wouldn't. They'd say, try make every ounce of improvement that you can. Whereas unfortunately, a lot of Muslims, again, for similar reasons where of the guilt and then they're reflecting their own weaknesses, they'll point out other aspects. I mean, you experience it every day when people tell you, where's your hijab? And it's like, well, actually, no, you're trying to make all these other improvements and you've changed your life massively from kind of bartending to not drinking alcohol and all these other things. And yet the one thing that you aren't doing is the point of conversation, as opposed to people encouraging all the other positive changes that you've made. And that's what, I don't know, stop drinking alcohol, dressing more modestly, etc., not listening to music, all of these other things.
Right.
And the reason why it bugs people is because they don't necessarily want to confront their own guilt about any other wrong thing that they're doing themselves. So their objective will be, oh, well, actually, I don't like the improvement. So there's jealousy around the other people, the improvement that other people are making. So do you want to let me point out their flaws?
Yeah.
I saw something. I can't remember the actual phrase, but it's like, those who are pulling you up will never point out your flaws, but your haters will. And
Yeah,
the
right.
idea is that actually, like, those people who are successful and are trying to improve and trying to be better, they're never gonna kind of like criticize you or kind of
Yeah.
point out your flaws.
Right.
They'll encourage you, they'll coach you, they'll teach you, they'll point out right and wrong, but that doesn't mean they're gonna do it in a way where we're kind of like accusatory or kind of
Right.
like the best teachers that I've had experience with, the best scholars,
Mm-hmm.
are probably surrounded by a lot of non-practicing people that go to their congregations, and it's because they have an air of encouragement and improvement and kind of comfort, and a case of, well, actually, do you know what? It's okay for you to have these flaws because we're all on a journey. We're all improving. We're all improving at different rates. The number one thing that I want you to do is improve. I don't necessarily need you to hit point X and you're now okay. It's okay. So as long as you're going upwards, that's all that matters. And I think that's where true kind of scholarship and teachers are. They're in that environment where they're encouraging that. Whereas I think where a lot of other people go wrong is they trying to do all of the correcting and the haram policing and the kind of you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. And they justify it to themselves by saying, enjoin the good and forbid the evil. But there is a whole relationship and environment that needs to be built before people improve.
Yep.
And that's a very human thing. And until you do that, that improvement's not going to come.
Right. And to piggyback off that, and maybe I said the IS too soon, 244, is do you preach righteousness and fail to practice it yourself? Although you read the scripture, do you not understand? This is the thing I always think about when people are like, where's your hijab? Hijab now, It's like, what are you not doing? Why are you, why, instead of criticizing me and what I'm not doing, why don't you contemplate wearing the hijab? It's like, I contemplate it every day, obviously.
Yeah.
You think I'm like the first person that's like, oh, are we supposed to wear a hijab? Oh, I didn't know that. Obviously, I know that. I'm very aware of that. But it's like, they have to point out because it's maybe they're doing something that, like, well, I wish I could do this or I wish I could do that. It's like, right. So, and I think, maybe I said that a little too early, but I think it sort of piggybacks the enjoining good and forbidding evil. It's like, okay, but also remember that you're not also perfect, right? We're all and every sister I talk to who wears hijab is like, it's a journey. I'm like, I know it's a journey. And they're like, we're praying for you. I'm like, instead of saying in all capitals, hijab now, how about you pray for me? That would be better adab for you. That would be more helpful, is like praying for me. And so it's like, instead of, maybe I'll delete that comment and be like, maybe I'll just pray for her instead.
Sure.
That's always an option, right?
Exactly.
But yeah, I think it's ego. I think there's nafs there, obviously, because we want to show that we're good Muslims, right? We want other people to show that, oh, look, I'm doing this. And that's obviously Riyah, right? Showing off, or is it Riyah that you're showing off for to show that you're, like being early to the masjid? I mean, I'm always early generally, but only because I'm like super enthusiastic. But like going to the front of the line so people see, oh, look at her.
So it's doing those good deeds for the purposes of other people seeing them.
Is that Riyah?
Yeah, Riyah.
Okay, Riyah.
And I think it's one of those things kind of, and one of the other reasons why people don't self-improve is because they are comfortable and complacent. And we've talked about it a lot, and you certainly talked about it earlier, is around kind of being comfortable with being uncomfortable. Yeah. That's when improvement happens. And people become very comfortable with people become very comfortable with what they watch, what they consume, how they behave, their habits. They've become very comfortable with those, and they're not comfortable with being uncomfortable. So I'm
it's a big one.
The example that kind of comes to mind is like smoking.
Yeah,
people aren't comfortable with the idea of the uncomfortability that will come with not smoking, and they're not ready to kind of put themselves through that. So they'll just be like, oh, it's fine. Or they will not be...
I'm addicted.
Yeah.
I can't
Or
stop.
they'll not become... Or they won't be comfortable with the idea of changing their consumption habits because it will, I don't know, it will either be boring or it perceived to be boring, or it will not be as fun. And they're not ready to put themselves through that level of discomfort.
Right.
So they'll just watch the entertainment without any filter because that's what's comfortable to them. So if you're really wanting to improve, you have to become comfortable with the idea of discomfort. And we've just come off the back of Ramadan just a month ago, which is the epitome of kind of discomfort for the sake of improvement, and becoming comfortable with the idea of discomfort, because you're taking all the things that are usually permissible and you're making them impermissible for yourself during that time. With the idea of training yourself to become comfortable with the idea of discomfort. So if you, and that's the thing that perturbs people, whereas they don't necessarily want to change because they become uncomfortable with this idea of doing things differently or doing things that aren't appeasing to their nafs or appeasing to their kind of ego. And that's an uncomfortable position for a lot of people.
Oh, of course. For a lot. Yeah. I think smoking was a perfect example of goal setting. It's like, I need to quit. I know I need to quit and I'm addicted. So instead of just going cold turkey, which rarely works, right? It's okay. So I smoke a little bit less, I use the chewing gum, the Nicorette or whatever it is. And then I just, there are steps that doctors use. It is an addiction that they use. There's steps that you can take, slowly, manageable, digestible steps that you can take, that you can eventually quit smoking. I mean, there's billboards everywhere in the United States, quit smoking, because they know how harmful it is for you, right? So if you need to take a doctor's, use a doctor for that, then fine, whatever it is, like that. If you think it's a crutch, that's okay. But if you have to smoke less, you buy less cigarettes, okay, this pack is going to last me a week, and then I'm going to go onto the gum, and yes, I'm smoking once in a while, okay, I have to go back onto the gum. It is a process. You know what I mean? Life is a process, digestible steps, but just out of reach. I'm not going to buy cigarettes. I'm going to take another piece of gum, even though, so there's, smoking is a great example. And it's one of those things where it's a little bit different. It's an addiction, but I would also say that watching Netflix instead of reading Quran is also an addiction. So I don't remember what's the stimulus that you get when you are scrolling through TikTok. Dopamine, exactly. It's a dopamine addiction, right? And I've seen now on Instagram people like detox from dopamine. I think that's going to be a real big trend in the next year or two. Is like this dopamine detox. Like how much time can you spend offline? That might be, but it is a dopamine thing. I think it's a little bit about, again, the egos and the nafs. What's comfortable? Yeah. What will people think of me? So, yeah.
And I think the other thing around why people don't self-improve, and I think it goes back to how much do you want it? Saad Abdurrahman Murphy from the Qalam Institute, he talks about how if you really want something, ask yourself, how much dua are you making for that thing? How much effort are you putting into that thing? How many physical, practical steps are you taking to fix that thing? How many kind of professionals are you seeing to deal with that thing? So when it comes to, like, let's say self-improvement and wanting to leave a sin, how much dua are you making for you to stop that sin? Right. Because if you're not making dua for you to stop that sin, that means internally, if you're being really honest with yourself, you probably still want to do it. So at the very least, start making dua for that sin. Start saying, Ya Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, please help me stop committing the sin. Ya Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like, and then start seeking professional help. If you need to go see addict specialists, go do it. If you need to go see a therapist, go do it. If you need to go see even like a hypnotherapist that kind of will help you break those habits, then go for it. But don't say, I want to improve. I want to become a better Muslim. And not make dua for that thing, and not start doing practical steps for those things. Then you're a hypocrite. So
I was
it's
just
like,
going to say you're a hypocrite, which is like, what does the Quran talk about all the time is hypocrites and how bad it is. And that's what led me to Islam, is this being around hypocrites. And I could see that. And I'm like, why do you say one thing and do another? It drives me insane. You have to, I want to improve. I'm going to lose weight. I'm going to get the app on your phone. I know this when I was a social worker, people, I want to lose weight. Okay, let's put a food app on where you track your food. Oh, I could never do that. Well, why not? Well, it just makes me feel uncomfortable. It's like, yeah, I know. It's called that you have to. Let's put a fitness app on your. Oh, I could never do that. Why not? You know, and it's funny. It's like they do anything. I just want to complain about my problems. I don't want to do anything about it. It's like, then stop complaining. Like you have to. That it really drove me crazy.
And then Islamically, the thing is like, okay, people can complain about problems in this world, but then Islamically, there's that second step of, on the day of judgment, they're going to be presented with their deeds and the fact that they had an opportunity to change and didn't. And then complaining about your deeds is going to be too late, because you're not going to have the opportunity. Whereas Islamically, it's like, okay, let's say, I don't know, I'll use alcohol as the example. So someone drinks alcohol as a Muslim, and they're like, I want to change. They don't make dua for it. They don't seek professional help. They don't seek medical help. They don't speak all of these things. They don't do anything to change. And then in the judgment, when that sin is presented to them, they're also going to be said, well, actually, and then there's a hadith that talks about this, how a different person who's in the exact same circumstance will be brought, and it will show that he demonstrated change. He was in the exact same environment that you were, but then they did the correct thing. Right. So at that point, it's going to be too late for you to complain about the fact that you drink alcohol, because it's going to be too late. It's going to be the day of judgment. And that other person will be brought, because everyone's response to this is, oh, well, you don't know my situation, so that's why it's okay for me to kind of do the wrong thing that I do. Like, you don't know that the environment that I brought them in, or all of these extra things. But then somebody else is going to be brought who's going to have the exact same environment and did that thing correctly. Yeah. So if you're genuinely not happy with the fact that you commit a sin, you've got to be honest with yourself and actually think, well, actually, what am I doing to actually help me stop committing the sin? Am I genuinely crying in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Am I making dua as best as I can after every single salah? Say, Ya Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, please help me stop this sin. Like, you speak to a lot of people. Like, I don't particularly like the word non-practicing, but I'll use it for the sake of simplification. Non-practicing people, and you say to them, oh, well, like, you encourage them and you say, oh, you should pray, or you should maybe not do this thing, and say, oh, well, make dua for me. It's like, okay, yeah, all well and good, I will make dua for you. How much dua are you making yourself? How much effort are you actually putting in yourself for that thing to change? Right. And I've known people for 20 years, and their state of their Islam hasn't changed. And every single time you speak to them, they're like, oh, well, make dua for me. It's like, well, no, you've got to do some of the actual dua making and the effort making yourself. My duas will be answered in a different way, but until you take that first step, that change is never going to be achieved.
I know. Yeah, it's crazy. It's, I left my hometown, and people always, oh, I want to quit drinking, or I want to do this, I want to do that. And I had to go back for a reason. And it's interesting because the people were still in the bars and still, oh, I'm trying to quit drinking. I'm like, what are you doing in the bar then? You can't just say one thing and not actually make, and the thing is, you're not responsible for the outcome. You're responsible for the efforts that you put into that process of not drinking or not smoking or not drink, whatever it is, that sin that you're involved in. So yeah, you have to be, like you said earlier at the very beginning, it's like, you have to honestly you have to be honest with yourself, but you also have to be willing to make that change. And I think that's really, really important.
There's the ayah that says that verily, the children of Adam are sinners, but the best of the children of Adam is the one who repents. So the fear of failure is another trick that Shaitan uses to try stop you from self-improving. And he says, oh, well, you're probably just going to slip up again, so you may as well not try to improve. That's another one of Shaitan's tricks. I highly recommend the podcast Know Their Enemy.
Yes,
because he talks about these tricks of Shaitan stopping your self-improvement in a lot of detail. One of the things he does is the fear of failure as one of the things to stop you from improving, because he's going to say, well, do you know what? You're probably going to commit that sin tomorrow. So do you know what? I'll just not kind of try to improve myself in that sin, and that's definitely not the attitude to have. So you're going to try improve to the best of your ability. You're going to try, you're going to fail, but as long as you keep trying, that's all that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants. And as long as you're honestly trying, not trying, but honestly trying, that's all Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Insha'Allah, I could put that podcast link, the first episode, in the show notes, because it was just, and you're the one, when we were doing the convert coaching, it was really, really helpful. And I've shared it many times because it helped me so much. Yeah, it's a beautiful series, Kalam podcast. Yeah, Insha'Allah, I'll put that in the show notes. Yeah, absolutely.
So, as we wrap up, any final thoughts on self-improvement?
No, I don't think so. I think self-improvement. I mean, I think there's also personalities that are okay with just doing the bare minimum. I really, I think there are people who are just like, yeah, I'm just going to skate through this and whatever happens, happens. And I think there are other people who are just like go-getters and like, I think that I can make the most out of this situation. And like you said earlier, there's some people are born into the same situation and maybe different continents, and they're given these same sort of opportunities, and one does really well and one does poorly. And it's like, that's maybe just also a personality issue as well, where some people are extroverted and more okay with being uncomfortable than another person. So I think there are just people who just are like, yeah, I'm just gonna skate by and just see what happens, and it's like, okay.
It's unfortunate how a lot of kind of attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and hadith and ayahs can fuel complacency. So there's a hadith where a person comes up to the Prophet ﷺ and says, I promise you that I'm going to do no more and no less than the 5 pillars and stay away from haram. I'm going to stick to them. And the Prophet ﷺ said that if he isn't sincere to what he says, he's going to go to Jannah. Right. And that people look at that and it fuels complacency. And the response to that is, that was for that person. The Prophet ﷺ knew that person specifically, knew that perhaps he may get overwhelmed or whatever, so told that. I would say that somebody who wants to try toe that line of just sticking to the basics, I would say that the shaitan is working very hard for you to not improve. And do you really want to risk having some of your deeds not getting accepted? Because bear in mind that person, let's say you're revising for an exam and you know that if I revise X amount, I'm going to get a pass, and you stick to just revising the X amount. If a question that comes up, what happens if you answer the question wrong, that you're so convinced that you've revised so hard? But what if you get the question wrong? And because you've hedged your bets so much on just getting this minimum, what happens if you fail? You can't blame the exam paper saying, oh, well, I revised it. It's like, no, you said that you could have given yourself every opportunity to get an A on this paper. You aimed for a pass. You didn't meet the criteria, and now you failed. That's your fault. So for those people who want to kind of stick to this idea of, oh, well, I'll just do the minimum and get away with it, you have no guarantee that your deeds are going to be accepted. You have no guarantee that what you think is enough for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So do everything you can to aim as high as possible, so that even if you fall down, you're still probably going to pass. And they say that the idea, and we've talked about it a few times, about the idea of fard, sunnahs, and nafils. The idea is that the sunnah fills in the word isn't coming to me, but like wherever your flaws in your fard were, the sunnah fills those gaps. It kind of makes up for the kind of, let's say you prayed a fard salah, but you made a mistake, even unconsciously. Right. The idea is that if you pray a sunnah, it will kind of compensate for the mistake that you made in your fard. And let's say you made a mistake in your sunnah. The idea is that if you do a nafil, like fasting, for example, let's say you did your fard fasts, but then you did a sunnah fast. The idea is that the sunnah fast would kind of compensate for any mistakes about that you made in your fard fast. So my kind of parting advice would be that aim as high as possible so that you minimize the risk of you not making the grade.
Right. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows what you're capable of. So if you're skating by and he's like, you know what? You could have done better. I mean, that's going to be a brutal day for you, right? There's no going back on day of judgment, right? Even though we're going to see that people are like, oh, well, let me just one more chance. And you had your chance. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows what all of us are capable of. Are we
Sure.
reaching our potential? Are you reaching your potential? We all have hopes and dreams. What are those? And then work backwards, plan ahead, like, go backwards. Okay. Reverse engineer those goals, and then inshallah, like you just said, shoot high. And then if you get, okay, well, I still made it. I still, I'm not reciting well, but at least I'm reciting in Arabic next Ramadan. But
Inshallah.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows what you're capable of. And if you just kind of skating by, it's good enough. It's like, was it? I mean, you don't want to answer that question on the Day of Judgment.
Exactly.
I mean, that's terrifying, actually. So, alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. So, Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much for.
Jazakallah khair. Do you have time to answer some questions on YouTube?
Sure.
Inshallah.
Let's go for it.
Navira, walaikum salam.
And we'll be part of the. Are we going to put this in the Spotify episode?
Yes.
Okay,
Inshallah.
cool. Okay,
yeah,
so
absolutely.
right. So, somebody has asked a question. What about waswasa? Or waswasa, which is whispers.
Yes.
So, and in terms specifically with regards to how those whispers affect your opportunities for self-improvement, I think we've kind of covered it in the case of that shaitan will whisper to you that, oh, well, there's no point in you trying to improve because you're probably going to fail again tomorrow, or there's no benefit in you improving because you're still doing all of these mistakes. And those are the two kind of main ones when it comes to improving. So I think it's just about quietening those voices, surrounding yourself with people around you that are gonna help you, because the shaitan will talk to you and this is something that kind of someone explained to me once that was quite important. Shaitan talks to you in your own voice, like the whispers of the shaitan that happen. They aren't in an external voice; they're in your own voice. So it's you convincing yourself of these whispers, and you have to convince yourself in your own voice that these whispers that aren't correct, and kind of have to quieten them down. So if somebody's struggling with whispers, you just have to learn what the responses are and kind of battle them, and surround yourself with people who will also you can go up to them and say, this is the thought I'm having. What do you think? How can I battle this? And hopefully they'll explain it to you.
Yeah, and inshallah, you have good people around you who are like, you know what, I see you slipping a little bit. What's going on here, and want to explore that with you. Then can kind of lead you back into the right direction, inshallah. So, so somebody said here, show up. Okay, Mufti Mank. Where is it here? I just saw this question. Everyone experiences bouts of jealousy. The dignified person conceals it with the wicked one while the wicked one acts upon it. Yes. Okay. Ibn Taymiyyah. Don't forget all humans are okay. I'm not seeing it anymore. Maybe it's up further. Oh, Seagate, Rob. Oh, okay. So they're just talking to each other. Never mind. Alhamdulillah.
No
I was like, oh, actually, it's those. It goes not to me. So never mind. Okay. Alhamdulillah. So Jazakallah here for watching, everyone. And inshallah, you have a wonderful Thursday night. And tomorrow is Jummah. So happy Friday, everyone.
Inshallah.
And inshallah. And we'll see you in 2 weeks' time, inshallah. Right? Okay. Jazakallah, everyone. And we'll see you on the next podcast.
Inshallah.